Okay, so in case you thought this week couldn't get any crappier, or since the election anyway, federal court allows Indiana's gender-affirming care ban to go into effect. Again, cis people need gender-affirming care too. This is not just a trans issue. I wonder how they're going to get around that so it's not obviously discriminatory, or they just don't give a fuck. That could be too. Anyway, the Trump judge, didn't go far enough, sorry. A 3-judge panel on the United States Court of Appeals for the 7th Circuit is allowing Indiana's ban on gender-affirming care for minors to be implemented. The law in question was signed in April 2023 by Governor Eric Holcomb, and of course he's a Republican, and it bans doctors from prescribing puberty blockers and hormone therapy to trans minors. Right, because why should we make things comfortable for teenagers? We should just let them suffer, because apparently that's what you do in high school? I don't know. Holcomb said that the bill was so vague that it was clear as mud, but still signed it into law. Are you kidding me? It passed the state's legislature by a large margin in both chambers, which meant that lawmakers could have overridden his veto if he didn't sign it. Now, the fact that it was clear as mud, that tells me that, yes, indeed, minors who happen to need gender-affirming care for whatever reason, who don't happen to be trans, they're going to get caught up in this too. And that might be the only way to get people to realize how fucking dumb this law is. And it's sad that it has to happen to them before they, get a shred of sense, but the ACLU of Indiana sued on behalf of 4 families to stop the law from being implemented, and a district court judge issued a preliminary injunction to stop it from going into effect while the case worked its way through the legal system. The state appealed the injunction to the 7th Circuit Court, which lifted it in February and now issued its final ruling against it. In that ruling, the judges said that the district court was wrong that the bill would cause irreparable harm to trans youth who would be forced to detransition, saying that psychotherapy and parasocial support can be used to treat gender dysphoria in the absence of gender-affirming care. Right, because all of these people know all about medicine and psychiatry and gender dysphoria, and oh my god. Seriously, just because you don't understand how things work doesn't mean that there are other people who know it. I assure you, you guys do not have medical degrees. Why are you insisting on practicing medicine of any kind? Okay, not to mention, I wonder if they understand what words mean. Like psychotherapy. Okay, first off, people who are trans, regardless of how intense their gender dysphoria is, that's not the point of this. They go through therapy. That is the first step in transitioning. It's not like they go to a doctor and say, I need hormones. And the doctor's like, oh, okay, and hands you hormones. That's not how this works. They go through therapy. They go through the ringer to be sure that they are indeed trans and not just having a moment of, what, I'm going to go through puberty? What? No, I don't want boobs. That is different than feeling like you were born in the wrong body. It's just, let the doctors doctor, let the lawyers lawyer, and stay the fuck out of each other's lane. And parasocial support. Do you understand what parasocial means? It means that, say, someone who's watching this video has been watching my channel for a while and they think they know me simply because you feel a connection through my videos. And so you feel like you know me, like we're friends, like, and you have this scenario in your head about how we would be besties if we ever met and whatever else. That is a parasocial relationship. How the fuck is that going to help someone who's going through gender dysphoria? What, because misery loves company? That if they watch videos of how other people dealt with their gender dysphoria, or explain how intense it is and how it's improved and whatnot, that somehow their gender dysphoria will go away. I mean, they might feel better that they're not the only ones experiencing it, but that's not the same as treating gender dysphoria. That just means that you, in both cases, that's just you acknowledging that it exists. And great that you can find other people that are experiencing that. That's good. You should be able to find other people who are going through what you're going through. You should. That's one way to not feel like you're alone. That is a part of therapy. That is a part of dealing with the transition and what you're going through. Everybody needs to feel like they're not the only ones who are going through whatever problem. That is not the same as treating the problem. Seriously, I would love to hear what they would do if they were volunteering for like a suicide helpline. I would actually be petrified to hear what advice they would give those people. Seriously, don't talk to people. You suck. And this is coming from someone who doesn't like talking to people. It might be different if Indiana barred all treatment for gender dysphoria, but SEA 480 does no such thing, wrote Judge Michael Brennan, who was appointed by Donald Trump. Of course he was. Well, okay. What other treatment does he think there is? Is he saying, oh, well, if the child can manage to live to adulthood, then they can get treatment for their gender dysphoria. So what's the problem? Okay. Now, my understanding of gender dysphoria is it can be quite crippling. This idea that you are living a lie, that you aren't living your authentic self. I have a hard time explaining it because I'm not completely sure I understand it exactly, and that's okay. I mean, I've heard that trans people have a hard time explaining this because it's just so hard to put into words because it is so personal. But if you are going through some stuff and your childhood is supreme hell because you're being treated in a way you don't want to be treated, and you're living a life that you feel is not yours because you want to be able to do this, 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 and this, depending on where your gender dysphoria manifests. It could be because you don't like the fact that you have boobs, or that you feel like you should be having a penis, or whatever the gender dysphoria. I've heard trans people say that trans men say that they can't wear dresses. They couldn't do drag because that would cause serious gender dysphoria. There are other people who hate the sound of their voice. Even after being on hormones, they hate the sound of their voice. They think it sounds too manly or too girly, depending on which way the transition goes. That is gender dysphoria. That is something that they are going to be dealing with for the rest of their lives. And to tell them, oh, just survive until you're adults and then you can get treatment. The fact that children end up taking their own lives because things get so bad for them, and your response is, oh well. That tells me that you are a prick. I mean, seriously, I realize that the people who Trump surrounds himself around lack empathy, but Jesus Christ. All major medical organizations in the U.S. support gender-affirming care as safe and effective. But, people who are anti-trans seem to think that they know more than actual medical professionals as to what is proper medicine or proper science, because of course in their minds they don't think experts exist, so of course it's perfectly fine to tell a bunch of scientists how science works. I'm sorry, no. They're experts for a reason. You flunked freshman biology. I don't see how you're the same. Anyway, the majority of the panel also said that the state law doesn't violate trans youth's due process or equal protection rights, since both trans boys and trans girls are barred from accessing gender-affirming care. Oh, I see. It's perfectly fine because we're shitting on all of you, not just one part of you. Are you kidding me? Just because both trans boys and trans girls are being treated the same under your shitty law doesn't mean that you're not violating their ability to exist. And their equal protection. Because this is an equal protection between trans boys and trans girls. What about them versus cis boys and cis girls who need gender affirming care? Because how many girls still in high school have to be on birth control? Not because they're having sex, even though that might be a possibility too, but that because of their periods being so messed up that they need to be on hormones to make it bearable. That is gender affirming care. That is something that you are preventing trans people from accessing, but cis people are allowed to have it. That is where the equal protection clause comes in. Not because you're treating trans boys and girls the same way, you dipshits. So sex does not indicate on what basis treatment is prohibited. Yes, it fucking does. Brennan wrote, the law does not create a class of one sex and a class of another and deny treatment to just one of those classes. No, You're dividing it between cis and trans, not on boys and girls. How is that better? The argument depends on not seeing trans people as a class of people. Cisgender youth are still able to access gender-affirming care under the law, which explicitly states that it only has certain treatments when used to make someone resemble a sex different from the individual's sex assigned at birth. Exactly. Judge Candace Jackson Akawubi, appointed by President Joe Biden, dissented from Brennan's decision, while Ronald Reagan appointee Judge Kenneth Ripple joined Brennan in the 2-1 decision. What? Republican versus Democrat? I'm shocked. We are disappointed and are considering our options, says Kenneth Falk of the ACLU of Indiana. Indiana Attorney General Todd Rokita, also a Republican, hailed the decision, cited God in a statement on it. Right, because your God is so loving that they created trans people just to make them, just to torture them. Right. I really wonder if people think things through when they talk about how God is on their side. I really do. The 7th District Court of Appeals decision today is a huge win for Hoosiers, unless you're trans, and will help protect our most precious gift from God, our children, he said, unless you're trans. Trans children can go kill themselves, right? Seriously, what are we doing here? I realize that there are people who just cannot grasp that being trans isn't a choice, but it isn't. I mean, seriously, who the hell would choose to go through this hell? Nobody. Nobody would choose. Actually, there are a lot of trans people who wish that they were just born in the right body from the beginning instead of being trans. It's not something they chose, just like I didn't choose to be asexual. Gay people didn't choose to be gay. Most people didn't choose to be straight. That's just how it works. Nobody chose to be bi. Nobody chose to be poly or pan. It's just not how any of this works. Why is this so hard for you to understand? And I might point out that God, the Bible, nobody ever said shit about trans people in there. So why are we even invoking God? He never said shit about trans people. Certainly never Jesus said anything. Nothing in the Bible says anything about trans. I just don't understand. Basically, this is just another example of God hates the same people I do. You're not protecting children. These children, if they do not get the help, may or may not survive to adulthood. Why is this so hard to understand? I've seen comments where a trans child isn't a matter of life and death just because they can't get surgery. How the fuck do you know? You don't know what hell they're living in. Again, they are going to therapy, they're getting help. I don't see, you just refuse to accept that this is needed care. And the reason you can't wrap your brain around and refuse to wrap your brain around it is then you have to accept that you're not the good person you think you are. You are actually harming people, and you refuse to accept that you are capable of forcing harm on someone. And because your ego will not allow you to accept that you're harming people, you refuse to accept that you could be wrong about medical issues you literally know nothing about. Because you just can't accept that you might be a bad person. Well, I'm here to tell you, yes, you are. Because you are sentencing children to death if they are not mentally strong enough to survive to adulthood before they can get the necessary help they need. Because unless their gender dysphoria is super bad, they aren't getting surgery. They're socially transitioning, and they're on puberty blockers, possibly hormones. Again, depending on how desperately they need certain care. But that's not for me to decide. That's not for you to decide. That is for the doctors and the person involved to figure out what is the best course of treatment. Because just like any other medical decision, it's nobody's fucking business except the person who's involved. And possibly the parents, depending on the situation. It's not for anybody else. It's certainly not for someone who's never known a trans person, let alone have a loved one who's trans. It's not any of your business what kind of care they get. It's the doctors who get to decide. If it turns out you're trans and you decide not to get any help and just suffer, that's on you. You can't tell other people that they need to suffer too. It's just maddening how holier than thou these people will be about how they seem to think that they know what's best for others because they refuse to accept that there is that biology doesn't extend beyond freshman biology. If that were the case, experts would not need to go to further training and further education. They could just take ninth grade biology and be done with it. But they don't. They get higher education. Why? Because it's more complicated than what you think. And I do not understand why you refuse to accept that your education isn't complete. That just because something, and let's face it, science is always learning new things. So if you went to high school in the 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever, shit has changed. So people learn more. That's what science does. So even if ninth grade biology said something, like 100 years ago, that doesn't mean it's the same as it is today. I just don't understand why people are so refusing to accept that the biology they learned years ago, number one, isn't complete and might have changed in the preceding decades. I don't understand why people can't understand that science changes. Our understanding of how things work changes. Now, for those who are still so smug, I have one question for you. And only one question. Explain XY females to me. Explain to me. Don't look it up because, well, let's face it, you guys don't look shit up ever anyway. But tell me, how is it that they exist if you are so convinced that there is no change between XX for women, XY for men? Please explain to me how that happens if you are so convinced that gender and sex are the same fucking thing. Now, I believe that is all I have for this video. And with that, I will see you guys in the next one.